All right, so here we are in the bug hunting mode, carrying over from 36A. This is episode 36B. And just to refresh, I was going through all of the queen acceptance tests, and in the most recently written one, where I surrounded the queen with opposing pieces, I discovered that there were a couple of extra moves being floated in there. Basically, that she was being correctly blocked from moving beyond the opposing pieces everywhere, but in one specific case, which was moving directly to her left. And so the thing that struck me is that clearly seems like a bug. And I'm just wondering where it lies exactly. So I'm kind of looking at this and thinking, is this in the queen piece herself? And no, I don't think it is. I'm looking through some of these other pieces and what kind of tests I have written about them and reminding myself that I'm pretty sure this concept of blocking comes in the board. The pieces don't know about one another per se. So what I really want to look for is not whether the piece is restricting movement somehow in its get moves from method, but that's going to be here in the board. So I'm looking around and thinking, okay, in the board is where I started writing this new style of tests that are expressive of their context. So I'm going to write another one of those, and I'm going to describe this setup here where there's a queen who is surrounded by enemy pieces. And what I want to do is, now that I've got this failing acceptance test, I want to narrow the focus and write a unit test that's going to fail around board, given this same setup. So board get moves from given surrounded queen should. And I'm going to write this style of test that I have grown used to writing here throughout the course of this series. So after I get the overhead out of the way here of getting the test class in, I'm just going to start with the context. It's historically been my style to write the first unit test with the context built in and then start to refactor from there. I'm going to need all this context in the test anyway, so I'm getting a little bit less, I guess, purist about starting off initially with the context in line in an actual test before I refactor it. That might not be the best discipline, especially if you're just starting out. I would maybe stick to the tenets of red-green refactor in this sense more literally, like, just write a single test and then factor things out only when you're avoiding duplication or whatever. But given the expressiveness of this and this new style of baking the setup context into the name of the class, I feel more comfortable sort of writing the context separately and then writing the unit test later. I might waffle on that as I might on other things. Like, you'll find, not really an idealist about pretty much anything when it comes to software development, whether they're maybe the most impeccable practices or some of the worst practices. Everything is really a matter of trade-off. Even things that are generally considered really awful practice, like duplicating code or using a lot of global state or what have you. Really, those are just expressions of different kind of trade-offs. For instance, the global state trade-off is, I don't want to get a headache reasoning about my code right now, so I'm going to use this somewhat short-sighted shortcut. So even that, it's not that it doesn't have a merit, it's just, in my opinion, very questionable merit. So in that vein, I view everything as kind of a matter of trade-offs and maybe getting a little bit away from this particular discipline of starting with a test method and factoring out from there. I view this trade-off as not being so bad. I don't have to do a refactoring later, and I don't think I'm having a lot of trouble with clarity, since I am expressly saying in the class name what the context needs to look like anyway, and this test initialize method is my way of expressing this class's test context. So basically, in a class called board get moves from given surrounded queen, it makes sense to create in the context a surrounded queen. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start off with, and I may or may not go back and add more tests here, but I should say that this should not return a move for the board coordinate at 1-1. That's the behavior I observed in the acceptance test. So what I'm doing here is I'm sort of speculating that we're going to see this error again here. So I am expecting this test to be read, and I'm expecting it to get me closer to the actual problem. And I'll keep zooming in with unit tests until I get to a place where I feel like I can fix the problem. So I'm going to say that there shouldn't be any coordinates in here that match 1-1, and I see that there is. So, okay, the problem is in get moves from. Now, I'm looking at this method, and it's been a while since I was in here. So my suspicion is that there's something wrong with what I'm being told about is blocked. So I got in here into this path maker, and I wanted to check, and I was kind of in an elimination mode. Like, it's probably not the actual generation of the paths. It's probably the logic that's figuring out whether this thing's blocked or not. So I spent a minute looking in here, and then I kind of came back out. And then at some point I got here into the debugger again. It is, as I always say, it's not my preferred method of solving things here, but it can be pretty expedient for when it doesn't occur to me right off the top, like what kind of test I might write. I just want to see values of things at this point. So like ncrunch on the side here is great for me for seeing the path through the code. That can tell me whether I'm getting into a control flow statement block or what have you. But seeing what actual values are coming back when there's a lot of link going on, I tend to find the debugger to be helpful. So what I'm going to do here is I want to see if I can tell where I'm getting tripped up. So I'm inspecting these methods again and thinking about how can I determine whether I'm getting flagged properly for these moves. So I think if I'm setting the debugger or setting a breakpoint for where it is, I can look and say, okay, I'm going to find a point at which I'm trying to go from 4-1 to 1-1. And then I'll see if that is blocked. I'll maybe go set another breakpoint in there and then see if is blocked is coming back true or not for that. So what I started doing is I thought, oh, anytime now it's gonna give me the right destination that I want. I'm not sure exactly what order this all comes in. I did get clever here eventually after being obtuse for a bit and set a watch. I could have also set a conditional breakpoint, but I don't know. I try not to get like too crazy advanced in the debugger. I suppose that's silly. My reasoning is just that if I feel this pain, it'll sort of incentivize me to seek other solutions than the debugger. So I'm playing these kinds of games with myself. So I believe I had found, nope, continuing to go. Okay, so it's not 1-1, but there's 2-1. And my hypothesis now is I'm trying to go from 4-1 to 2-1, and I'm getting that back as a valid move, so I think there must be something going wrong here with his block. So I'm going to set a breakpoint down in here and see if I can tell what's happening. So I'm going to... Man, it really kills me that my breakpoint or my debugging shortcuts conflict with Camtasia's. So I have this path checker, or path maker. So I'm going to get the spaces to the destination, and then I'm doing some things by using the path itself in the last space. And that's kind of how I figure out what it means to be blocked. So blocked here in concept, I'm looking at does any friendly piece exist along the path of where I'm trying to go? And is there any non-friendly piece that isn't in the last space? Because that would also cause a block. And in fact, that's the scenario here that seems to be going haywire. So we've got this enemy piece that is along the path, but for whatever reason, we're not getting back that it's causing a block. So I played around with the debugger a little more. I maybe wanted to take a look at this next case and see kind of what I could figure out here. And then I sort of had a bit of an aha moment where I think I moused over last space, or something occurred to me like, are we getting back the right last space? Because that could throw everything out of whack, and that's kind of one of the only things I hadn't really looked at and reasoned about. Like, it kind of turned on in my head that do I know that the order of these paths is always progressing in the correct direction? And I realized that, hey, I might not know that. So I'm trying to think at what point. Yeah, now okay. So I've got another case here that probably is going to be a problem, and I'm still kind of tinkering around in the debugger to see if the aha light goes on. I'm talking, with 2020 hindsight about where I eventually got, but this is one of the things that I just tend to do in debugging mode is just look around and seeing if anything looks like, a miss. And so nothing there. Those are the spaces along the path I would expect, but what is this last space value? Last space is important in this right-hand side of that OR conditional, which is where we should be playing. So what is it actually that I'm getting back for the last space? That's going to be pretty interesting. And I see that it's 3-1, which is a problem. The last space should be 1-1. So that tells me that maybe there's something wrong with this get path to destination method. I see that I've got this conditional where I'm going into get horizontal spaces. And now I'm looking at this enumerable range. And I realize that enumerable range is always going to be ascending. So when I split this up to fix a problem a while ago, I got everything right, but I didn't get the order of this path right. So let me try this and see if I go green. And hey, I do go green. So that's great news. I am totally green all across the board here, which means that all my tests are passing. And since I was running long, I wanted to wrap up here anyway. And that's one of the nice little things about the TDD approach too, is you can kind of try something, see if it all goes green, and then feel good about where you're at, and kind of go back and reason about the code more and write more code or more tests later in order to really solidify your understanding. So I'm putting this to-do item in here to say, look, if I made that mistake in the horizontal, I bet I made it in the vertical, and it'll help me reason through this problem to write the vertical test case and confirm my understanding of my code and where I was getting it wrong before. So I'm going to stop the debugger. I'm going to commit here to GitHub to get this episode up, and I will leave that note in my Trello to come back and do that next time. So thanks for sticking with me through this bifurcated episode, and I will see you next time.